There's some things you'll fix on your car, and there's some things you take to the guy.
Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
so.
Hey there, this is Matthew Jennings, and on this episode of Peachjar Extra Credit, I am here in St. Louis with St. Louis Public Schools, and we are going to talk about advertising. And if that's something you've been thinking about, haven't dipped your toe in the water yet, haven't put budget dollars toward that yet, we're going to talk about some really neat and creative ways that St. Louis Public Schools has leaned into that space. I'm very happy to be joined today by Carl and George, and we're here at St. Louis Public Schools. Thank you so much for joining me here this morning. Really loved to walk in, getting to see the district office a bit, right here in the heart of downtown St. Louis, which is really awesome. Having a blast already in the city. We are here, I'm in town for CGCS, the Council of Great City Schools, and INSPRA, so two big conferences. And I know you're so busy. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today and talk about this. I know it's a topic that a lot of people kind of wrestle with. Do I spend dollars in some of the unique and creative ways you guys have? And I've been really impressed with the work you're doing on the websites, with some of the billboard stuff, with social media, and just ways you're getting the word out about your programs and services. So before we jump in on all of that, I'd just like to do a quick introduction. So Carl, why don't you kick us off? Who are you? What do you do here? What's your role at St. Louis Public Schools?
Sure. Well, first of all, welcome to St. Louis. You know, we're a Midwest city, but we like to think we have a little bit of Southern hospitality, so I hope you've been treated all right.
It's awesome. Thank you.
So I'm born and raised in St. Louis. I'm a product of St. Louis Public Schools, and here I am the brand strategy manager, which means I wear a few different hats, as I'm sure many of the listeners do. That includes social media. It includes some website updates and management, as well as working on advertising and marketing.
Good. Okay, so you are the one to talk to. George, how about you?
Yeah, George Sells. I'm Director of Communications and Marketing here at St. Louis Public Schools, and so I kind of oversee the messaging, both earned media and internal, external purchase, you name it. Basically, I kind of run the megaphone. So I run the ways that we communicate out to folks, and that is always a big challenge, I think, for any school district. It is an even bigger challenge, a district like ours, where we have some high mobility rates, some high poverty rates, things like that, it's hard to wrangle everybody, but you need to be able to get the word out to everybody, whether it's just internal information or you know, the advertising end of it, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
A lot of things from enrollment to attendance, all those sorts of things. Really important stuff. Then we're always looking for good ways to, you know, massage the process and get the most out there for our families.
That's really great. Yeah, so you two have a really big job here at the district. Can we start with just tell me a little bit about the school district, kind of the demographics, how big is it, how many students do you have, what's kind of the makeup of the district, charters, privates, that kind of stuff. Can you talk to me just kind of that?
I'll do a little, I'll start. We'll kind of go back and forth. Carl's the product of the district.
This is great.
Graduate of Gateway STEM High School. We are a district of right around 18,000 students. Okay. We have got 62 schools spread across St. Louis. A unique thing for us, we are the city of St. Louis, and if you look at census figures, the city of St. Louis has been shrinking for many years. This was a city of a million people back in 1950. In the most recent census, the city has fewer than 300,000 people now. Wow. A lot of folks moved to the suburbs, as has happened in many Midwestern cities around the country. How that has impacted St. Louis Public Schools is the fact that we have a physical plant that is built for, at our peak, handling about 100,000 students, and we have less than 20% of that now. Wow. So that is one of our many major issues. And then you take from there. I mentioned we've got some high poverty rates. About 20% of our students, a little over 4,000 kids, qualify under the federal definition of homelessness. That's not maybe the stereotype of somebody like everybody being in a shelter or the person sleeping in a park or something, but these are kids who just don't know where they're going to be staying tonight. It might be with an uncle one night, grandma for two, over to mom. They just kind of pass around that way. And as you can imagine, that presents some very unique communications challenges. It's not just as simple as sending out the email about tomorrow's pajama day at a given school and everybody gets it. So this is very important. And we are a unique district from the standpoint of we are very much a support system for our families. A lot of these kids rely on us for food, rely on us for being the safest place that they might be all day. So those are some of the things that go along with the district demographically. And again, it's one of those things that makes the challenges of communication that much more important. And when you get into an advertising context, you want to be careful with your money, obviously. You're spending taxpayers' dollars. You're spending dollars that are being, that are intended to be used to educate children. But we can't educate them if we don't have them in a classroom.
So true.
And so that's kind of where I'm probably skipping ahead a little bit to what your question is going to be, in finding that balance of making sure that these children are receiving the care that they need and know what is available to them, advertising becomes very important.
Yeah, critical. And how do you connect with those families is critical. And and some of the strategies we're going to talk about here today, which are very creative and unique, I think, for you guys, that can be scaled. Anybody can do these things. We're going to be talking through today, but very interesting in the demographics. So I really appreciate kind of that high level look at things. We're all competing, it seems like. I know very few districts, just a handful of districts across the country that aren't in a declining state, like a decline in enrollment. And a lot of that does have to do, especially in some centers like this, where people are maybe moving out in the suburbs, those kind of things. Also, a lot of it is our birth rates. Just birth rates are in a significant decline in the United States, actually globally, in all the industrialized nations across the world, really, birth rates are down. And so, we're not having kids like we were, right? And so there's less students to go around. So it becomes even more critical as we, I guess, more or less, lack of a better word, compete for a dwindling number of students in any given area.
And you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to commoditize kids.
Yes, exactly.
But at the same time, there is a competition there. Carl can talk about the role of charter schools in St. Louis, and that has been something dicey. You can get into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So, of course, there are charter schools that we compete with, in addition to parochial schools and other options that parents have. So one of our strategies, I think, is to really, we offer a free pre-K program. So we try, and we can kind of talk about how we advertise for that later. But one of our strategies is to get the parents in at that stage and do the sort of, if you'll try us and like us approach. So I think that works out very well for us. But yes, we do have to compete with several charter schools. There are some local charter schools as well as some of the national charter schools who have schools in our city.
That's awesome. Yeah, and great, both of you making really great points there, that it is about getting the kids in, getting the families in, wrapping your arms around them, and then they see, oh, wow, the staff here is lovely, the school is lovely, their experience has been wonderful, they're making friends, making connections, and then, then they stay, which is wonderful.
That's the trick to it.
That's the playbook.
So let's talk about some of the traditional ways.
Sure.
And then maybe some of the more non-traditional ways that you're getting the word out about some of your programs and services, considering that some of the challenges there are unique, and how do we connect with families that maybe aren't connecting with us as much on email, or maybe aren't visiting their school's website as often as another parent would. And then also, more specifically, what I'm really interested in as well is how are you connecting with the families you don't even have in your system, right? That are just out there in the city or moving in. So talk me through like some of your traditional methods of getting the word out about, if it's kinder registration or a summer program. Like if you want to use a specific example, that's totally cool. Something top of mind.
Sure. So of course we will start with our website. Then we have all of our internal tools, which include Peachjar. It includes our emails. Depending on how important it is, robocalls, text messages. Of course, we try our best not to abuse those. Some parents just hate getting those calls. So when it's very important, we want that to make sure that message is heard. We'll do a robocall. I think I want to mention earlier, we didn't really talk about the 3,700 staff members we have, a lot of whom are also parents, right? So some of those messages we'll share with our staff as well. And depending on what that message is, sometimes it's internal, sometimes it's external, because a lot of our staff members live in and around St. Louis. So we can talk again a little bit later about how we decide where we advertise.
Okay, cool.
And then from there, you've got social media channels, of course. Now, one thing that there is a debate over in education is how you use your social media.
I know where you're going.
I've sat through seminars where people want to say that we're just going to tell the good news and all the warm and fuzzy stories, and I am a firm believer in the polar opposite, that your social media channels should be one of your most important communications tools. And so when people look at they know they can go to our social media, our families do, and that they can get information on school closings, they can get information on a variety of things. And the best example probably of that proving really useful was we had unfortunately we had a school shooting this past October, and we were able to use social media immediately and very effectively, both to get information out, but also to kind of tamp down some of the misinformation that was going around online. And there was a lot of misinformation going on around online as that was going on. So that was really important for us, and that is something we use both organically, and we've continued to grow our followings on those areas. But then we also, we will use the boosting functions on Facebook, for example, and when it's something that we want to really like blow up and get out there. But we also, that said, we also do use it for the good news. We have a full. You're in our studio right now. We've got videography capabilities, and that sort of thing, and some really strong storytellers in our department. And we know that you can't rely on the outside media, the local newspaper, the TV stations, to tell your story.
Right.
They don't have the resources or the time, for starters. But so we take that opportunity to go out and tell a lot of our own stories. I'm a really strong believer, and ever since I came in here, I'm a really strong believer in using video to tell those stories. And we've done a ton of that. We produce a lot of material. I can't put a number on it, but we produce a ton of material. And that's something that has proven very important to us, because we want to be able to tell our own story. We want that to be out there, and you control your own narrative, control your own message. I mean, you can never rely on, even if they come and cover the story, the traditional media, and we work hard at getting earned media as well. But even if they come and cover the story, you can't guarantee it's going to come out right.
Or who will see it.
Fair, exactly. So we're continuing to try to build all that, and that's all stuff that we're doing before we've spent a dime. And I should make that clear. Those are the things that I realize that not everybody is in a large urban district that has a fairly large budget, at least comparatively to a lot of districts. But the things that you can do pretty inexpensively are do good video stories about your district, communicate on social media, and when I say communicate, you don't talk at people. You got to talk with them.
Be social.
That's something anybody can do. The internal emails and that sort of thing. We've gotten a pretty good cadence down of what we're going to go just to staff with, or just to families, that sort of thing. What we're going to go kind of in a broader space, and we folded Peachjar into that as well, as far as messaging that we want to get to families. Obviously a lot of that comes externally from the folks that partner with Peachjar, but for our purposes, we can insert a lot of things into that stream and get out the information. And again, I talked about our some of the challenges of our district. There is a study being conducted right now by the universities locally that they pretty much finished up on mobility of families. And they look very specifically at St. Louis Public Schools. And you're talking, they used to call it transiency. You're talking about a kid who starts a school year in one school, ends up in another, or doesn't end up at all. And we have actually got a couple of schools, and I mean, it breaks my heart to say this, but we've got a couple of schools that had a 100% mobility rate. So what does everybody have? They got that phone in their back pocket.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the social media, the things like that, that is something you can use to follow a person. A robocall sounds pretty old school, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? Everybody's got their phone in their
works.
pocket. And so that's very important. Now, for the robocalls, we try to be very intentional about making sure that when that phone rings and they see SLPS on it, they know it's something that matters.
Yeah.
You know, we're not gonna ring them up about every bake sale and whatever
12
else,
o'clock in the
because
afternoon,
yeah,
freak
'cause
'em
if you
out.
do
Yeah.
that, if you do that, you know,
Right.
then that's when they start tuning you out,
Yeah.
and you've got to be careful of that. So those are some of those channels. Then you get the advertising, and I'm going on way too much. I'm sorry.
No, you're okay.
I do want to add one other thing. I want to mention that we are fortunate enough to have a pretty mobile student recruitment team. So when we talk about some of those communities that are harder to reach, they actually go out into the community. You'll find them at parades, at community events, at free events. They'll have all of our SLPS branding, and they're enrolling parents as well as talking to parents who are currently enrolled about some of the things we have coming up, some of our free resources. Just another way we're trying to reach out to our parents who may be hard to reach.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I love that. That's another great tip. And you both have now said several just really great things I want to touch on. So that's a nice, easy one. Having a team. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit more if we have time. But also you mentioned, social media and boosting posts. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit. Social media is a really great channel. You mentioned crisis, times of emergencies. Make sure your families know that in the event of an emergency, social media will be one of the channels that you will be keeping active. It's a lot more relevant than a website or getting calls or text messages out. It's really easy for us to do that on social media in times of a crisis as like a
And it's faster.
It's
I mean,
faster.
as a communications person, we're having a crisis. I'm physically at a school, at a location. I can take my phone out and say, here's where our rally point is. This is a reunification point. Obviously, you're going to have some communications between the department on all that kind of thing, but you do have the opportunity to be able to just get it out there in a quick fashion, and just make sure that people know what's going on. And again, the ability to use social media in a crisis situation begins with having that relationship and having those habits of looking at your social media in place long beforehand. That starts today.
Yeah,
it does. It starts today for anybody that wants to use it that way.
And make sure that you're talking at your parent meetings. Your principals are talking about it at PTAs. Make sure they're talking about this. Our social media channel is critical. Get on there, like, share, subscribe. That's really good. So let's talk about boosting really quick.
Sure.
I've done it quite a bit. I found it extremely effective and cost effective.
Yes.
What's your experience been boosting a post? Give me an example of something you would boost, and kind of why, and like what your budget is on something like that.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of boosting on Facebook. The best thing I like about it is the fact that the budget has so much flexibility. So if I want to do a quick hit with $20, for instance, I can, and I can see some instant results from that. And if I want to spend $200, $400, $500, I can do that as well. The other thing I really like about it is obviously my ability to pick which area or zip codes. Yeah, exactly. So I've got a few different audiences built in. So it takes a little time, but once you build that audience together, you sort of set it and forget it.
Yeah.
So I've got a pre-K audience, for instance. Any parent who has a child ages 3 to 5 living within the city limits, I can reach that group for a certain amount of money. If maybe it's for a staff recruitment, I'm going outside of the city. I might go 20 miles away from the city, and I'm looking for a particular set of people who might fit that particular role.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I did much the same and found it really invaluable. In fact, my district that I was doing that in, when I would put out those pre-registration boosts, they would say phones would start ringing. Like they're like, there's a direct correlation behind you posting it and boosting it, and our phones ringing for people to register for school. So.
Well,
it's
and
great.
That makes me think of another way we've used it for pre-K is another way is that so a lot of people have their information saved in the Facebook already, so they have the ability to generate leads for you. So we'll advertise for pre-K, for instance. A parent will say they're interested. They can hit a button that automatically auto-populates their name, a callback number, and something like their zip code.
Yeah.
It builds an Excel list. I share that with our pre-K department. They call those parents up and get them in and register.
That's so good. That's a great way to go about it. I never did that. So yeah, a couple of really great tips there just around Facebook and boosting posts. You get to dial your own budget. So if you want to dip your toe in the water and you got $75 to spend, you can make that $75 go pretty far.
And I can also say too, if you have a situation where you have to sell this, you might be in an office where you're trying to convince somebody that this works. If you can just convince them to give you $25, $50, I think that's enough to at least show, here's the amount of impressions I had, here's the number of clicks I had. Imagine what I can do with 4 times this amount.
You get really good analytics and data.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. And obviously you should be tracking that.
Sure thing.
And on any of these tools that we're talking about today, some of them are probably a little bit trickier to talk about, like return on investment, like billboards. So let's jump into some of the more non-traditional things. So we talked about some of the traditional stuff here, which everybody pretty much has access to, and some unique things and strategies that you can really lean into there. But let's talk about like radio, TV, billboards, print.
Which really is the tradition, the quote unquote traditional. It kind of speaks though to how we've started communicating now, because the social media stuff, things like that, the electronic communication has become the tradition, for a generation. But then when you get into TV, radio, I mean, you can spend a ton of money with that.
Yeah.
And obviously, you've got to be careful of how you go about it. I'm going to start on the technical end with digital. We do our own social media, that sort of thing. And we also keep all of our production elements, all of our art, all of that is done in-house for us. We've got the resources to do it. We've got the people to do it. So we save a lot of money that way because we're not bringing in agencies. The one place where we do use an agency is on some of the digital buying, because when you start getting into things like geofencing, when you start getting into things like pre-rolls on OTTs and
customer profiles,
you want somebody like, for example, we have video spots that we were making sure were popping up on episodes of Abbott Elementary running on Hulu. Because what is a better office for an urban school district than Abbott Elementary? So you want to make sure. So you get into some of that stuff. You have to know your own limitations.
Yeah.
I mean, we know enough to be dangerous when it comes to social media and stuff like that, but there are people who have a great deal of expertise in that sort of thing. And I would recommend you learn what you can, do what you can on your own, but if you start getting into where you're spending higher dollars, it makes sense to bring in somebody, even if it costs a little bit, it makes sense to bring in somebody who really knows what they're doing, who that's their expertise. It's kind of like there's some things you'll fix on your car, and there's some things you take to the guy.
Exactly.
So that's important there. Billboards, TV, radio. We have seen radio in particular be very effective with our audience. The nice thing about radio is that you can pick and choose demographics of different stations and kind of hone in a little more, be a little more specific to audience. And we've when I was first working here, it was still during the pandemic, we were doing some vaccination clinics. And we did radio for a couple of days leading up to our first vaccination clinic, and we had a line around the block.
That's great.
So that right there was just kind of like, take note, radio works, at least for us. Now, you have to know
your audience.
You have to know what works in your district, too.
Sure.
You get into TV, I mean, it's the most expensive, and you're hitting everybody, including a lot of people that have nothing to do with your school district. That doesn't mean you don't do it sometimes. Like for hiring, we absolutely do it. When we're doing, first of school enrollment, back to school, don't forget to go to school, that stuff. We do use it we go ahead and do that there. We've found also though that cable, for the while a lot of people are cutting cords, there's still a lot of people that have cable. Cable is significantly more cost effective than broadcast television and can be honed down much more specifically. You can hone it down to zip codes. You can almost do what you're doing with Facebook, but do that with TV spots. Running on, and you can almost pick and choose your channels,
programs.
And your programming, exactly. So that becomes a very effective method. Billboards, Here's what I'll tell you about billboards.
Okay,
All right. Now, I had a hard time. I walked in. SLPS was already doing billboards when I started here.
Okay.
That's something that we've always done. Full disclosure, my wife for many, many years was in radio sales.
Okay.
And spent those many years in radio sales telling people why they shouldn't buy billboards. So I had listened to this. It was kind of pre-programmed.
Yeah.
And so when I walked in and saw we were doing billboard, my first impression was, ah. But then it's anecdotal, but you do see reaction from people. And if you do it well, if you have the right messaging, I can't sit here and tell you that I pulled in this number of students based on this number of billboards and this number of cars who pass it. And the billboard companies can tell you like roughly how many eyeballs you're going to get from traffic and stuff like that. But if you get the right message out, there can be reputational value to it. And they're not as expensive as they used to be.
Okay.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
But you also become, you end up at the mercy of the market. In Missouri, this is an interesting challenge for a school district. Marijuana was legalized this past year. All of a sudden, my space availability for billboards was cut way back by all the pot billboards.
Right.
Because every dispensary, and it's the wild, wild west in this state as far as dispensaries go, all those places are advertising, and all of a sudden I'm having to, kind of fight for space to get the spots I want and that sort of thing. So, but, that's going to temper down, and we'll be back to what it was. So billboards are probably one of the toughest ones because it's so hard to quantify it.
Yeah.
But again, if you got the right messaging, and if you're hearing back from people, and sometimes it's just a morale thing.
Yeah.
Your families and your staff, teachers are seeing these things, and it's like it's a pride thing. Yeah, absolutely. Are you hearing some of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's absolutely a pride thing, but also if any of your listeners are marketing professionals, as I'm sure they are, then you know about the marketing funnel, and so you think about the awareness being at the top of the funnel, followed by consideration and conversion. It really helps to put those folks into that awareness part. But in addition to that, it is prideful to see. Again, we have 3,700 employees in the city of St. Louis. I believe we're the second largest employer, or somewhere above there. So it's nice just to ride around and say, hey, I work there. Just to see us kind of out in the community, I think is a good feeling.
There's a lot to be said about that. Absolutely.
Top of mind.
Yeah, top of mind. And, I liken it to, I was driving down the road not that long ago, and I saw a billboard for Nike, and it was just a Nike swoosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not like here's the new shoe or whatever. It was just a Nike swoosh, and it's like, well, they don't need to do that.
Right.
It puts it right back at the top of your mind. You're like, oh, maybe I do need a new pair of shoes. So it is good. So the RI might be a little tricky to balance there, but I think the case can be made pretty clearly to like an executive cabinet or a school board as to why that is relevant. And one of the big ticks for me, checking off a box, is that pride factor, and especially if you are trying to hire. I imagine a really great billboard with some smiling kids and come work with us, right? Like that's probably a really great message.
And one other thing, if I may, that reminds me is that there's a bit of a branding issue too, and that is because some of the charter schools, there's some confusion about what is St. Louis Public Schools, what is a charter school, and which is which. So I think we
that
also
is kind of intentional on the part of some of those folks. But we're not here to call names. But,
I want to leave that out.
Absolutely.
But so we also use those billboards as a way to educate our parents in the community on the difference between the two.
And I think you can also. And again, I blanch a little bit using the term competition, but it is what it is. Look at what your competition is doing.
Absolutely.
Right now, obviously, we're all in the midst of a teacher hiring crisis. Yeah. We're all in the midst of a bus driver crisis. Yeah. We don't have to deal with the bus driver part ourselves because we have a vendor that does all that. So that's
they're dealing with it.
They're dealing with it on their end.
They're canceling routes on you probably. And
absolutely.
Drivers and So.
But the teacher end of it. When I'm driving down the highway and I see between here and my house, I see billboards for 4 different educational entities all trying to hire teachers. Part of me is like, I better well be there.
I better be in the space.
I got to be in the game someplace. And the more, every district being different, but the more competition you have, the more channels that you want to investigate, because you're competing for hiring, you're competing for teachers, you're competing for all of these different staffing positions that are with a bunch of other school districts. Some have more means than others, and then you're also, again, we're in a town where the legislature in this state has been very deliberate about trying to make the waters friendly for charter schools at the expense of public schools in the eyes of many. And in doing that, they have created a scenario where we are forced in a way to compete for kids. And again, our new superintendent, Dr. Keisha Scarlett, she just started the first of the month, and she was speaking at her swearing-in ceremony the other night, and she spoke to not commoditizing children.
Beautiful.
And we do not want to commoditize children, but there are people out there who, in some ways, they're doing that. They're doing just that. And so, unfortunately, so you have to, you also have to let your conscience guide you a little bit. You have to let the values of your district guide you, and that's very important to us. That we are going to be first and foremost about creating great and equitable opportunities for children, with a very big key on the equitable part, because that's not there everywhere, and the needs that are addressed for children with special needs, that sort of thing, that we do more of than any other district or in the city, or any compared to like charter schools, private schools, because that's our responsibility. And those children are why we're here. And so you have to find that place between being all those things, and at the same time knowing that there's somebody out there trying to compete with you, and it becomes, it could become existential for some districts, and it's not right, but it's a reality, and you've got to take that into account when you're deciding what you're going to do.
Yeah, that being in the space, you mentioned like seeing billboards for other educational opportunities, and just being in that space reminds me of a funny story in a previous district. I got a phone call one day from a neighboring district, and he says, "Hey, this weekly, it's a monthly, every 3 months, a local magazine is put out, very, very beautiful magazine about the community and all this other stuff. But it's very expensive, and I always had an ad for my school district in there every 3 months. I'm paying $3,500 to put this ad out there, and it adds up throughout the year. And so one day I get this call out of the blue from the neighboring school district. The PIO says, "Hey, I want to talk to you about this ad that you're running in the parenting magazine that comes out every 3 months." I said, "Yeah, dude, I've been meaning to talk to you about it." And he's like, "Yeah, well, the only reason I run the ad is because you run the ad." I'm like, "That's the only reason I run the ad, is because you run the ad." So, it is so true. Like, right?
And they'll play you off of each other. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I would also ask you, though, what is that magazine? What does it mean to the community? What does it mean to your families? First of all, are you getting some bang for your buck, so to speak, as far as communicating with people you need to communicate with? And also, is there just something in your community where that publication means something? And at that point, it doesn't really matter what anybody else is doing. You have to decide what is right for you and speaking to your family. But to your point, the salespeople will try to play those games.
It's kind of funny. So, radio, TV, billboards. You mentioned radio having a pretty significant impact, at least in your community. But let's say you were going to talk to somebody about leaning into just one of those, like dipping your toe in the water with just one. Would you have a recommendation on maybe one to look at maybe first? Again, not every community is going to respond to each medium the way maybe here in St. Louis, right?
Right.
But would you have a recommendation to someone that's maybe looking to spend they have budget dollars on advertising it in a new, innovative way?
Well, if we're not putting digital aside, because digital's a must. I mean, I think you've got to be doing you got to be in that space, whether it's the paid version or the stuff you can do on your own. You've got to be there. So let's just assume that's a must. When you get into the others, for our purposes, I would lean radio. If I was just somebody put a gun to my head and said pick one. And it's again because we're able to advertise somewhat directly to our audience, to folks in the city,
Makes sense.
to folks that are more likely to have their kids in St. Louis public schools, whereas TV and boards are just
You're
much
hitting a
more.
broad audience.
It's
Depending on programming.
it's scatter. It's just
Exactly.
very wide.
Yeah.
It's throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah, which might be great if you have an initiative. Sorry,
Yeah.
Carl. Like if you had an
Sure.
initiative, you're probably going to say like that made more sense for that.
Also less expensive. I mean,
Sure.
you can do radio spots for less money, certainly than TV, and then billboards, depending on your market and depending on what's going on, it may well be cheaper than that too.
Another benefit for radio over especially billboards is the quickness in which something can hit the air. So you can change out a spot if you'd like to. If you want to change out a billboard, first of all, it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
And it's
gonna
going to take
cost
some
you.
time for them to print and install it.
Right.
If you send the radio station a new spot, they can have it on the air the next day, depending on what station you're using. So
And that's
I like
helpful. I,
that
mean,
ease.
we utilize, like we're going to utilize that in a back to school campaign that we've got coming up.
Great.
We also have a back to school expo that we do in conjunction with the Urban League here in St. Louis, and to help promote that, it happens about 3 weeks before school, and right in the middle of our campaign that's already going to be running, we'll be able to yank out radio spots and plug in Urban Expo spots.
Great.
And be able to help along those lines, and that's important to be able to do.
Yeah,
sure.
that's great.
One other trick you could do with radio is alternate weeks. And you obviously can't do that on a billboard.
Yeah.
But if you want to spread out, let's say you want to advertise for 2 months, but you really only have 1 month worth of budget, right? You can
Okay.
you can advertise every other week.
Yeah.
And so the audience may not realize they didn't hear your ad that off week,
Yeah.
but they're hearing it again that next week. So it's another way to maximize your budget.
That's a great tip. I love that.
It's
Yeah,
helpful,
so-
but you do have to. The one thing you have to remember when doing any radio or TV is that frequency does matter.
Yeah.
I mean, the salespeople will tell you that, they're not lying.
Yeah.
Frequency matters,
Sure.
and so if you're going to go and do it, don't half do it.
Yeah.
You kind of need to dive in and really make a commitment to it. And I'm not saying mortgage the farm. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that you need to make a good commitment. If you're going to do a schedule, do a month.
Yeah.
And have some stuff going every day, have them running at the same time, have them running in hopefully high impact spots, and if you're going to spend the money, you want to get your money's worth, right?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, be intentional and ready to step into that space. Like if you're going to start a YouTube channel or a new social media channel for your district, you can't just turn it on and then let it die. You've got to be there.
Right.
Really watering
Podcasts.
it.
I mean, what we're doing right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've been doing some podcasting.
Oh, great.
And I've told our guys, and we've had a discussion about this, but we need to get better with consistently being there, setting a schedule and living by it, and having that frequency out there. And that's something else you were talking about. Things that were inexpensive or almost free to do.
Yeah.
This is another great example of it.
True.
Is you can get a lot of information out. You won't get as many viewers or listeners as you would on some things because they're longer, but you can get a lot of information out there, and that's always
a lot
helpful.
of sense. Yeah, that's great. Well, this has been really awesome. A lot of really great stuff here. Like I said, I've been watching the website, been watching the social media feeds. Do you have a few examples that we could just put up on screen, like of billboards, photos of billboards? Okay, great. So you'll be seeing that live as we're talking here. But I'll definitely link to St. Louis Public Schools websites and some other resources down in the description below. Be sure with any of this, you've heard both gentlemen mention it, but it's data, track those analytics. Make sure you're looking at that return on your investment so you know that, one, you're spending those dollars wisely, but if you need to go back and shake the money tree because you're seeing maybe that investment come back to you in really great ways and you need to maybe reinvest a little bit more significantly, really tracking that data and that analytics that goes behind it is going to help you really build your case and make that maybe more relevant to superintendent or board of education, something like that. If you need to get more budget.
I would interject also though that you do have to remember that it's an art as much as it is a science. There will be some things that you will never be able to know with certainty, and I would just very quickly use the example of the two campaigns we did, one for Camp SLPS, which is our summer school program, one for our pre-K program. Camp SLPS had record numbers this year. The pre-K also did very well.
Right.
So everybody was very happy with that. I would love to be able to sit here and say it was all me and Carl B. Mitchell. It was us.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, a lot of people did a lot of things that created an environment for those successes. I think what we did helped, and we will certainly do it that way next year. But you can't assume that it's all one thing and not a bunch of other things. And you've just got to. You got to go by feel some too. It's an art as much as a science.
And they're all just strategies, that all lead into hopefully students enrolling in St. Louis Public Schools. So, with that, maybe we can end on just kind of that example. Like, give me a run through of that example you had mentioned, summer program. What did you do to get the word out? What did you do? Radio, print?
We did
billboard?
full blast.
Full court press.
Yeah,
Okay.
that pre-K and summer school, both. We did the whole shebang.
And
the
really
reason,
good turnout.
yeah, and you got to differentiate. You got to know what the things are that make it attractive. The summer school program, very simply, it's free.
Yeah,
First and pre-K also, and I mean,
don't bury the lead on that.
Yeah, in our in our city, if you live in the city of St. Louis, you don't have to be an SLPS family. Right. If you live in the city of St. Louis, those two programs are free to you, and that right there. I mean, anybody who's got little kids and has paid daycare expenses knows the value in that, and so we're going to go wider with that because we're not trying to just communicate with our families. We're trying to communicate with everybody that we can, at least within the city limits. And so, you're going to be more aggressive with those things. And it was billboards, it was radio, it was TV, it was digital, OTTs, you name it, we did it, and it worked. And so, so then the next day, we got them in the door. Now it becomes our job to keep them here.
Yeah.
And I will add, George mentioned the fact that it was free. And one of the things we don't want to do is assume we know what the parents are most interested in.
Okay.
So one of the things I love about the digital advertising is the A/B testing. And some of the people listening would know about that, and some might not.
Yeah.
So you could have two messages for Camp SBS, for example. One, the main message is that it's free, right? That's the main message. You're sharing other messages, but that's the number one. On the other ad that looks very similar, the main message may be some of the programs, the passion projects, or the field trips, the weekly field trips. And that may be the main message. So what the A/B testing will do is it'll send both ads to about 20% or so of the audience, and whichever one of those ads wins out from that first 20% will be priority for the other 80%. So that way it takes some of the guessing out. We think sometimes that we know because we are parents,
right.
but we might not know exactly what. And then some of the parents are even younger now, so some of the ideas have changed. So that's a way to rely on information and technology to help make some of those decisions.
Really good point. Yeah, really good point. I love that. And that A/B messaging thing and knowing that we don't always know exactly what's going to land with a parent. Parent might be really interested. And I want my kid out there doing field trips, seeing more things, and free isn't necessarily that marker that's going to get them across the line. So very cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Right. Well, we've covered a lot here. I know you've got a really busy day, so I want to let you go, but I just can't thank you enough for spending the time and talking through some of these really unique ways that you're getting the words out and the why behind it. I think that's huge. And so if anybody's out there listening and they haven't dove into any of these areas yet, maybe pick just one or two and dip your toe in the water there. See if that works for you in your community, in your local area. As you've heard here today, it's very doable. You're not overwhelmed by these things, right? They're pretty easy to get out there.
When you do all the production in house, it can become a little overwhelming, and the deadlines can. But it's like anything. If for it to be good, for it to be effective, you got to put it to sweat equity. But it's worth it. Absolutely. It's absolutely worth it.
Well, I can't thank you again enough. Thank you. That's so awesome that we got to do this today. I really, really appreciate you. I'm looking forward to the next couple of days of just professional development. And I know you're doing a session, right?
Yep.
So this is going to be awesome. So I'll definitely check that out. And I look forward to seeing you too at the conference. So really, really appreciate you.
Take care. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Well, if you like this, be sure to like, share, comment, follow for more. Stay tuned. We're bringing you a lot more Peachjar Extra Credit episodes. So jump on that YouTube channel and follow along. Thank you very much. We'll see you.
Peace.